Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 24 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we are coming to you from the international headquarters of GSM Services and looking forward to having some great discussions in the coming weeks and months. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week and have Sallie Hendrick with us. Sallie is the Community Relations Coordinator, or at least she is today, with Bit of Hope Ranch. Sallie, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
So very good, and we're going to get right to it. And Sallie, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and anything you'd like to share.
Sure. So today's my anniversary. I've been married for 38 years.
Oh, wow.
My husband, Harlan, and I have 3 sons. They're married. And we have 3 grandchildren, so I am Grammy to 3. So that's one of the best things in the entire world. So I was a chemist, got a degree in chemistry, and worked for a company named Dow Chemical in Midland, Michigan. Moved down here about 30 years ago, raised some kids, did the nonprofit world for a little while, and then went back to work for Livent, which is the lithium plant over in Bessemer City. Was their marketing coordinator there for a while and retired about 2 years ago, pre-COVID, and decided I wanted to do something for somebody else. So I approached Meg at Bit of Hope and asked her if I could help her do her fundraising and event planning out there, and she was like, absolutely.
Very good.
So that gets you up to...
Did she ask how a chemist gets involved in?
So she's a chemist too,
which
is interesting. She was a high school teacher.
You know what? Actually, I think she did speak at my Rotary Club once, and I think that did come up. So now that you mentioned that, she was a
chemist over at Gaston Christian, and saw a need to help children, and loved horses, and so combined that love together. But yeah, when we do school field trips, both of us fight over who gets to do the fire pit, because that's where you do chemistry and a little bit of learning there. So. So you
kind of shared how you ended up there. Can you, I don't know if this was actually listed on the question, but kind of give our listeners maybe a quick history of the organization, kind of how it got started. And
Okay, great. So it's been about 15 years.
Okay.
So Meg was a high school chemistry teacher, and she saw some students falling through the cracks, and realized that if she could just get them into the arena with a horse, she could help them. So she ended up leaving the teaching world and deciding to jump off in a leap of faith to start an organization where you have horses help children, adults, and families in crisis. Approached a benefactor about land. She found 50 acres pretty much on the south side of town, and approached a benefactor, and he said, I will not put a down deposit for you. I will buy it and lease it to you for $1 a year.
Oh, wow.
So that started an interesting 2-year jaunt to fix up the area. The barns were out of code. The grass was waist high. The arena, I think, was at a 45-degree angle. So after about 2 years, they started and opened up and did a lot of work with what people traditionally think of with equestrian help is special need children and children with autism. And then branched out after that to help people who are wounded and in trauma situations. So we can talk about that when we do the mission statement.
Okay.
But, so pretty much we have 15 horses, and we help clients, and the horses are involved on the therapy.
So where exactly is the property?
So it's pretty much 321 and the South Carolina line.
Okay.
It's off of Robinson Road.
Yep.
Back there's about 3 or 4 horse farms back in that area. It's on C.R. Wood Road.
Okay. Yeah, I know actually exactly where that is. Of course, I know exactly where the location is, but some of our listeners may not know exactly where you're located. So you mentioned the mission. Can you kind of go ahead and share what specifically is the mission of Bit of Hope Ranch?
Sure. So I'll give you the
official
version, and then I'll give you my sort of short version.
Okay.
So, the mission of Bit of Hope Ranch is to reach, rescue, and restore hurting children, families, and horses through offering nature-based and complete equestrian-assisted therapy, wellness, and educational programs. So my short version of that is we rescue horses, and the horses help us rescue humans.
That's pretty good. So how long is you mean this is getting way off topic? Not off topic, but off of any of the questions that we shared. But how long is again, forgive my ignorance, and I'll use some terms I'm sure that y'all probably go, gosh, that's not what we call it. But horse therapy, whatever you want to call it. How long is that equestrian therapy? How long has that been a thing? Or do you know that? Or
I don't know that. Meg
Okay.
probably would.
All right.
Equestrian assisted therapy has been around a long time. There are two different pathways to do that, and Meg actually teaches horsemanship university programs to help people get certified in the area to do that. I think recently, and not everybody does the same thing we do, most people do the special needs children and autism. That's very common.
Okay.
A lot of people do that with volunteer staff and volunteer horses. We have added the whole trauma, the whole situation, and we have recently staffed up. We are now have 6 certified therapists. And so we're able to help the people that are dealing with sexual abuse, family situations, some of the harder topics. And then some of the topics that are going on typically now, we'll see a lot of clients that are having problems with anxiety. So they may have had problems with anxiety before COVID, and now it's just
Again, I was when you said that, I was going to ask, is that you've seen an increase in that in the last 20 months or so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we had a grant given to us from the Family Advisory Board, and we have put that into place, and that's mainly focused on teenagers and the preteens who are having trouble re-engaging into society. Right? They've been at home. They've been in front of a laptop. They've done school remotely, and they don't feel like re-engaging, and they're in their home. And so, amazingly enough, they will come spend a time with a horse and do therapy with the horse, but they won't go to the grocery store.
That's interesting.
They won't get out. Yeah. So, so for us, I'm sure you've heard this word pivot.
Yes.
We've all heard pivot and COVID, like sort of a universal word that goes together, but we have pivoted a lot on who we're focusing on and what we're doing, and we're offering our services more. We did remotely, but we're offering, and we're finding that people are using our services more because they find that it's a very effective means of getting help for their children and or also family situations.
Okay. Can you share, talk about, maybe this may not be the right word, some of your initiatives or programs, or just what can you share about some of the specifics of what you're actually doing out as part of the therapy, or anything you'd like to share, or what we would call initiatives? Or
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 2 client stories. I can't tell you an actual story, but I can tell you a typical story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Doc is one of our older horses. He happens to be almost 30. He is our first rescue. And he was left in a meadow with a pasture mate, and it was a while before the neighbors figured out that he was left. So he came to us starved, ribs. So we've had him about 15 years, and he's very healthy now. But to Doc, the food you put in front of him is maybe his last meal, right? So he's been in a starved situation. So that's his last meal. So that's his focus, right? So sometimes we'll match him up with a woman that's in an abusive situation, and we'll say to her, we'll put him in an arena, and we'll put in pool noodles, those pool noodles that you can
that my kids beat each other with.
Exactly.
When they're in the pool.
And we'll put in some bars and some wood poles and maybe some chains and some like tubs and drums and stuff like that. And we'll say, and then we'll put in food in an area, and we'll say, do not let Doc get to the food. So Doc's highest priority is to get to the food, right? It might be his last meal. And we'll say to her, draw the line somewhere, and don't let the horse get there. Now, you can't touch the horse. You can't tie the horse up. That's not fair, okay?
Right.
But use pool noodles, use barriers, use the drums, use something to stop Doc from getting to the food. And it's an adventure. Doc is, 1,200, 1,300 pound horse. I can look Doc in the eyes. So Doc is not huge. But, Doc is still, he's a horse.
Right.
And he's going to move toward that food. And so over time, what the client will learn and what we'll work with them is, okay, draw the line in your relationship. So where is that line you draw in that relationship? And how do you hold that line? And who are the pool noodles in your life? Who are the people that can help you do that? Or what is the situation that you need to do to draw that line? And so in the process of learning to work with Doc and learning to push back, the client builds confidence.
Oh, wow.
Builds faith, builds, and learns to, so it's an analogy. But the horses are also quite intelligent. They can read past the mask, and they can figure out whether you need to be leaned on, pushed on, stepped on, or whether if you're a child that's being bullied, whether you just need to just be loved on.
Okay.
So it's interesting as far as that. So the other one, I talked about the child who's bullied. We'll put them in a situation in an arena and let them choose a horse, and they'll tend to either choose the horse that's the one that's going to nip them, push them, lean on them, step on them, right, and help them push back, or whether they just need to be loved on.
Gotcha.
As far as that. So those are the two client stories. That's a typical example. We do have another horse. We call her the lie detector. So this is kind of like how you can see the horse can do like a tell for you. So our staff knows our horses really well.
Right.
And the horses can sense heartbeat from like 15 feet away. So they can tell anxiety. They can tell when the person says, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." And, their heart is just going nuts, kind of like me with this big phone in my face, this microphone in my face. But anyway, so the horse will sense what the client is wanting to say, not say, or whatever. So they kind of do a tell. One horse, when the client lies, like that one client, the counselor might say, "So how did everything go this week? How's everything with your mom?" And they'll say, "Absolutely fine." And the horse will just stop. So if the horse had been walking, the horse would stop. If the horse was, doing something, they would just stop. And so the horse professional would look at the counselor and say, "That's not true."
Oh, wow.
So the horses have tells. When you know the horses really well, they'll nod their heads up and down, they'll lick their lips, they'll breathe out, they'll do a bunch of different things. And so the horse specialist who, for every counsel session, you have a horse specialist and a therapist. The horse specialist will say, that's not happening. And so it's interesting the way the horses can be involved on the therapy and also clue in the therapist on what may be really going on. And obviously you don't say, "Hey, the horse just said you're lying," right? You come back at it a little bit later and say, "Okay, now let's go back to what's going on with Mom this week. Is you're communicating better, or is that situation better? Maybe the client will open up and tell you the truth next time."
Okay. All right. Well, that's very helpful because I think I've seen Meg give presentations a couple of times, but it's hard to, 15 or 20-minute presentation, maybe like a Rotary Club or something. It's hard to get an image of that. And if you've never been out there and seen it, that's a really good description of what you guys have going on out there. And I guess I'm not a horse person, but that's very interesting to hear. I mean, I wouldn't have just thought that, especially the lie detector. That's interesting.
So actually, interestingly enough, I'm not a horse person either.
Yeah.
I didn't start out coming to the ranch because of my love for horses, right? Mm-hmm. Most of our volunteers come that way. I basically wanted to do something for someone and approached Meg and said, "Do you need help raising money?"
Right.
She's like, "I can get lots of volunteers for help, but I can't get a lot of people who want to ask for money."
Oh, that's really good, yeah.
So I actually started riding the horses so that I could get to know their different personalities and have gained a lot of confidence over the last year and a half, just getting to know the horses and also gaining confidence riding. So it's amazing. Yeah, and they're like a PTSD dog, but in a lot of ways they're a little bit larger, a little bit more intimidating, and very effective.
Yeah, they're not small animals at all. So
we do have a couple minis.
Okay.
They're fun. One of them was born on the ranch, and they're better for some of our smaller clients.
Okay.
We have a donkey that
maybe not as intimidating.
Not as intimidating. We also, and maybe this is a good part to go over this, we have a wellness clinic we opened last fall.
Okay.
We had a ribbon cutting during COVID, which was kind of interesting, and we have wonderful air conditioning in it, actually. We have 2 split units. So
I'm very glad to hear that.
Yes, thank you for that donation. So we opened it last fall, and what's in there are climbing walls, swings, crash pads, lots of different things for core development, but also for the client who's scared to get on a horse. We may have a client out there who, unfortunately, is maybe 5, 6, or 7 years old, and just needs to have some therapy before they can even get near a horse or even close to our minis. So we have a workouts area there that will help build core muscles, but also will help just with that transition before they can do work with a horse.
So you mentioned, a couple times about the fundraising, and I'm gonna go ahead and maybe breach that subject before we move on. But so kind of talking about initiatives and programs. So what are some of the ways that you are fundraising, and then where does most of that come from? And then, of course, before we're finished, we'll make sure our listeners know how they can help specifically and what you might have. But so it's kind of, can you share maybe something about
great.
that?
So our budget is around $270,000. So it's not huge, but it is substantial. A lot of it is donations,
Okay.
Grant funding. We've worked with a lot of grants in the local community, as well as there are horse-assisted equestrian grants.
Okay.
And then, so the clients are mainly paid for by insurance. And then we have private pay for situations where maybe they aren't paid for in a work situation.
Okay.
Or able to pay for by insurance. And also there's riding programs. You can come ride. We have a wonderful 50-acre facility, so you could have weddings, birthday parties,
Gotcha.
corporate
Okay.
events. So those are some of our fundraisers. Those have been a little more challenging during COVID.
Yeah.
But in a typical year, we'd have several weddings, lots of birthday parties. It's a fun place to have a birthday
Right.
party.
I'm sure.
Yeah, you don't really do much. You arrive, everybody has pizza delivered. You get to ride around on a horse, and it's a pretty area. School field trips.
Okay.
For us, it's a huge thing. And then we had just a couple weeks ago, we had a 5K trail run. So we're trying to figure out what is that second fundraiser that happens in March and April. Obviously, everybody does the Run for the Money.
Right.
Or I guess it's the Community Foundation run
Community
now.
Foundation run now.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. It took me a while to change that
Yes.
in my vocabulary.
Especially since I've been doing it for 14 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much a lot of the different ways that we have raised money.
Okay. So again, I appreciate you sharing that again, but we'll make sure that our listeners are aware of what they can maybe do specifically before we're finished. You've been with the organization a couple of years now, and maybe this might be a question for you specifically, but also maybe for the organization as a whole. Can you share maybe what you're most proud of accomplishing at your time at the Bit of Hope Ranch, or maybe the organization as a whole, what maybe most proud of accomplishing?
Okay. I've been there 2.5 years, and during my interview, Meg took me over to what is now the Wellness Clinic.
Okay.
But at the time, it was 2 stalls with wood floors, and then there was a wash pit area. I guess what you close an enclosed, screened-in porch.
Okay.
And said, "I want this to be our wellness clinic." And I was like, okay.
Wow. Was that hard to envision at that moment?
I envisioned it, but I wasn't sure how to get there.
Okay.
Just because I didn't know all the organizations in town, wasn't sure who were the ones that we should approach. We did have a church come in and tear off all the walls. They had an absolute blast tearing off everything. I think it's more fun to demolish than it is sometimes to build.
It is, yes.
Get a little bit of that aggravation out of the system. But so I was very rewarding that in maybe 9 months, a year from then, we had the ribbon cutting. Thanks to people like GSM who were able to donate the heating and air, we were able to accomplish that and have a ribbon cutting with I guess it's now Gaston Business Association, was the chamber at the time, during COVID. And we had, maybe 35, 40 people there.
Well, that's
so
great.
It was very rewarding from that point of view.
Well, obviously that's a big one, right? To go from a couple of stalls with dirt floors to a wellness center. So that's a great one to share. And this is a question I like, and you've kind of already answered this in multiple ways, but I'll ask it anyway. Again, this is a podcast about why Gaston County is such a great place, but why would you, maybe in your own words, say Gaston County is a better place because Bit of Hope Ranch is here?
So I think there's a lot of people dealing with mental health issues. There's a lot of people dealing with wounds and hurts that hide.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And
Put on a good face, don't we?
we do. We all are able to cover it up. There's families who don't want to show that they're have problems. There's first responders that see some really traumatic things that are like, I'm fine. So I think we're able to give those people privacy, but also help in healing and hope.
Right. Yeah. My experience in 51 years is that even myself, we don't want to admit anything that is wrong or anything's going on. Right. It's, I don't know. We still seem to think, our society at times seems to think that's a sign of weakness, but it's, usually just the opposite when you can come to terms with that and admit that and ask for help. We don't like to ask for help.
Right. And it's neat to see the therapists that say, this client's ready to graduate.
Oh, yeah.
They're done. She's done. They're ready. And it's neat to watch the therapists feel like they really accomplished something by helping that person do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's as impactful as it gets, I would assume, when we can see the progress of someone.
Right. Well, I'm actually invisible when I'm out there. I try hard. You want to give that client that privacy.
Right.
You don't want to interfere at all. So you kind of turn your head and look away and don't watch what's going on. But you kind of want to know what's going on, right?
Sure, absolutely. So if you could look ahead, 5 to 10 years down the road, what do you envision the organization looking like? Are there any big plans already, or something? If you shared it, you'd have to kill us, or
that'd be kind of interesting. So we're at 15 horses, and I would say we're tapped out now.
Okay.
But I mean, you said 5 or 10 years, so I'd love to get to like 20 horses. We're at 6 professional therapists, so we could go up to 10.
Okay.
But what I really see is maybe using some sort of I'm trying to think, a caretaker on site, or somebody who lives there on site. So we have an area that's an old cabin that we could tear down and maybe put like a mini house or small cabin or something like that and have a caretaker on site. And then who knows what you could do once you have a caretaker on site, right? It gives the safety and the security that we need for our animals as well as us. But, maybe you could then end up putting some yurts out there or doing some fun things like that. But the next step would be really bringing out some sort of a caretaker or a security or something like that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I like that question, and sometimes it is hard, especially the last 20 months. It's hard to plan. It's hard to just
say get back to normal.
Well,
right?
yeah, I'm going to say right now it's hard to plan for next month, much less 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, we've pivoted, we've changed a lot, but I mean, for us, school field trips is a phenomenal fundraiser, and it's easy and it's fun to do, and we just
just hadn't been able to do them, have you? Yeah, so many things like that and now I'm afraid, a concern that I personally have is that we're getting so far away from some of those that you almost forget. 20 months is long enough to almost forget what some of that stuff was like. But yeah, I'm with you that whatever the new normal is, can we get it back a little bit?
Right. Well, we were able to, since we're an outside facility.
Yeah.
We were able. We shut down for 2-3 months, but we couldn't leave our clients. Right.
Oh yeah.
Things get worse for them during COVID in enclosed situations, and so we were like, we have to be here for you.
So is there anything I haven't asked, but I should ask, or anything you'd like to share about the ranch, or before we kind of shift gears a little bit? Then, of course, we'll finish up with some more information about A Bit of Hope before we finish up.
I guess what I really want people to hear is that we do more than just the special needs and autism.
Okay.
And that we are there for the people that are dealing with trauma, mental health issues. There's some really neat things as far as that. And then also we have a Stories of Hope tour. It's once a month on Saturdays at 11 o'clock, and you can look at the website, see when it is. But it's an hour-long, it's a free tour, and we pretty much tell some horse stories, and we tell some client stories similar to what I've shared with you. It is as in not specific, but a general situation.
And it's good. I mean, we'll make sure we share the exact website. But yeah, you guys have a great website. I mean, I've spent some time on it, especially in the past, but also preparing for this morning. But yeah, it's a really great website. So we're gonna shift gears real quick and talk about, have some questions for you that are really what, especially I'm sure the team at Bit of Hope Branch is wanting to know about you specifically. And as we, again, this is a podcast about good things in Gaston County, and today we're going to call it, "Do You Really Work in Gaston County?" Speed round of questions.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
And so before the recording, we already kind of touched on this one, but I'm going to ask it exactly how I ask it every week anyway. So, favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Vanilla, but I'm going to confess I'm a cookout girl. So I raised 3 boys, as I said, and about an hour after dinner, they'd be like, "So where's the rest of the food? Where's dessert? Where's snack?" And so cookout was our go-to as a family. So I'm a cookout girl, and I love Reese's. And so anybody knows anything about me, chocolate's my go-to.
Oh yeah,
and Reese's is
my kids were big, and it wasn't great either that there's a cookout on the way home from here, so right past that thing. Very easy too.
Yeah.
Easy and relatively inexpensive. So, Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Cheerwine.
Okay. Favorite
Absolutely.
local restaurant?
Gia's.
Oh yeah, Gia's good.
Yeah.
That's the second. Somebody said Gia before. I remember who that was. Was it Omershed? I think Omershed said.
And they've closed on Tuesdays, which I didn't realize until I've driven in there twice at lunchtime.
Really, on Tuesdays?
That's
kind of an odd day to be closed.
And I was like, oh gosh.
Well, you know what? The more than one place that I occasionally go to, I know some have closed on Sundays and Mondays because of staffing and staffing shortages.
And they might be open dinner. I just know that I went there for lunch.
Okay.
And just sort of was like,
have y'all had, kind of getting off track in here, but have y'all had any issues with staffing like everybody else in the past? Or or y'all specific enough that, you're able to find the need?
We're pretty specific. We did have some volunteers who felt unsafe to come out, and then eventually did come back. But we've lost a couple staff members mainly because they moved. Got married and moved. So we have brought on 2 staff members recently, 2 therapists.
I know in general, there's a labor shortage right now. We're feeling it here at GSM and could sure hire some people.
Actually, our challenge is when we need somebody in the trades to help with like electrical or plumbing or something like that. Yeah. That's our challenge. But no, we're pretty well staffed.
Okay. This may be, I'm assuming, well, I'm not going to assume the answer. Favorite outdoor activity in Gaston County?
So I love hiking Crowders and King's Pinnacle. Yeah. That's my favorite.
Well, that's a common answer, but we're fortunate to, frankly, have that in Gaston County, right? It's a very unique county from a geographical and just physical standpoint. So how about this is a question I ask every week, just because I'm the host and I can ask it. UNC Duke or NC State?
Clemson.
Hit something. I don't know. Laughter or that's good. Perfect, Elizabeth.
So 2 of my kids went there, so all my green money turned orange. So sorry about that.
Well, oddly enough, I've got my son is at Western Carolina, my daughter is at Appalachian State, and I have a 15-year-old, so we don't know what she's going to do after high school yet, but it could be worse. Clemson, it could be worse than Clemson. UNC and Duke both are worse, would be worse answers than Clemson. So what is something very few people know about you?
So I'm originally from up north, and in the winter they're very long. So I ice skated as a child.
Oh, really?
In fact, I think my parents ice skated a lot, so I was probably put on skates before I even knew how to walk.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I competitively ice skated until I was about 12.
So where was that? Where were you? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then I lived in Michigan for about first 10 years of my marriage.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm one of those Yankees.
So you're a professional.
Figured out how I got them.
Yeah. So you're one of those. Well, I won't say what we call them, but came down and is not going to go back. Correct.
Not going to go back now. No, in my 60s, I have no desire to deal with the long winters up there. But you have to find something you love to survive. And ice skating was that for me.
Oh yeah, well that's terrific. How about a book you would recommend, or article, or blogs, or anything that you might follow? But anything you would share with our listeners?
So I love David McCullough books.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, he's
the Wright
terrific.
Brothers. So I go to
that
the
was
Outer
very
Banks.
good. Yes,
I go to the Outer Banks all the time. Love the Outer Banks.
It's a great area. Yep.
And so we go to the Wright Brothers all the time. And so I read his book on it, and that's probably my favorite.
That
book
is a
to
great
recommend.
recommendation. I appreciate that one. Yeah, that's a really good book. Very interesting story.
Yes, very. Yeah,
more to it than you might think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd gone to the Wright Brothers Museum there and just heard
Oh,
the
yeah.
stories a lot,
Yep.
but the book just brought out a lot more behind the
And just
scenes
physically
about-
what it required, we can just drive out there now, right? But how to get there, and back then it wasn't so easy to get out to the dunes
well,
and out
the
there
dunes
to
all changed on
Kill
them all
Devil
the
Hills and all
time,
that. Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating.
it really is. So again, I appreciate that. So again, I appreciate you sharing that. We kind of try to just talk a little bit about some Gaston County specifics. So just a few more questions and we'll be finished up. And again, this is a question I like very much as well. So besides Bit of Hope Ranch, why would you say Gaston is such a great place?
I loved raising my kids here.
Okay.
Shield Museum was
Yeah.
a fabulous place to raise your kids and just go there. Snapping Turtle Pond is what we used to call it. And
Yeah.
inside a lot of the displays.
Yeah, we had Antipode on a few episodes ago. That was
Yeah.
a good episode.
And then, I mean, the Carey Mountain Health Park or Fuse, whatever.
Yeah,
we're
Carey
calling
Mountain
it.
Health Park,
And
yeah.
It's exciting to see something that got talked about that I thought, that'll never
With the
happen.
GSM Services Premium Club at
Yes.
Paramount Health Park.
Yes, and wonderful tickets over in that area. So it's just nice to see that come to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been here my whole life. It's to see that in that location is just, I won't say odd. It's just so it is. It's so nice to see that happening here and especially in the downtown area.
So my middle son, who lives in Atlanta, came back, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, and we drove him down. And I said, "You've just got to see this. This is really," and he was just as excited as we were
Yeah, good.
to see that happen in his hometown, in G-Town.
Yeah, if you haven't been here in a while, and if you remember the old Sears building, how it sat there forever, that location, and now to see what's there now and what's happening between there and the actual
They used to be
downtown
part of the
area.
Christmas parade, so they
Yes.
used to remember you sort of waited out by the Sears
Yep,
building
that's
and
right.
all that, and
Yeah.
so they were, it was fascinating to see.
Yeah, that's very good. So, if you weren't involved with Bit of Hope Ranch, what do you think you might be doing?
I've been in the nonprofit world a long time. Was at the Crisis Pregnancy Center, did a lot with Young Life. So I probably would do something with a nonprofit. I don't know, maybe help somebody with a home or help somebody learn how to read. Those are two valuable things I think people need. But I also love to travel. You heard I love the Outer Banks.
Yes.
We now go there. I'm actually leaving Sunday, and I'm going to be out there for a month working remotely.
Bless your heart. That's
I know,
great.
gee darn, someone has to suffer, right?
Where do you specifically go, if you don't mind me asking?
Rodanthe.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a house in Rodanthe, and the waves are probably maybe 40 or 50 feet from the beach. And every once in a while when there's a storm, it comes up underneath the house.
Oh, wow.
We rent the same house.
It's not the house from that movie with
It's very close.
Okay.
It's actually a couple
Oh, yeah, my
streets
wife made
over.
us drive down there so we could see it. Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about?
They moved the house, and so it's new look. I mean, they moved it a while ago.
Okay.
But it's very nearby, and like I walk
I'm not
the
sure. I
beach
think I'm
and
embarrassed. I knew that about that. Well, I can't remember the name of that movie. Do you remember the name of that movie?
Knights of Rodanthe.
Knights of Rodanthe. Well, duh.
Yeah. But so I've watched houses that used to be there slowly fall into the ocean. I mean, the sands are changing. So there's a couple houses that we were used to rent that now you can't rent, but they're still there. They haven't fallen in yet.
Yeah, that's a great example of North Carolina, right? You can do that. And then Saturday, I'm probably going to, my wife and daughter, we're going to go up to the mountains probably for a day, so you can do just so much you can do
we
in
just
North
drove
Carolina.
in last night from Boone. We went color tour. So my husband said, "Oh my, we're going to go from the mountains to the beach in within 4 days."
Yeah, that's great. And
that
you can do
is-
that
that
and not
is
leave
wonderful.
the state. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this, I say this about several questions, but this is actually really my favorite question. So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
You gave me these
That's a
questions
sinister.
early.
That's a
Yeah.
sinister laugh.
You gave me
Sallie.
this question early, and I'm glad you did because I thought I would buy stock in Apple.
That is the best answer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Oh, wow.
But separate than that, I think I would say to myself, make lasting friends, right? Invest in people, not stuff, and make the lasting friends because that's what you need.
And when you're 20, you think those friends that are around, you're going to be there forever, maybe. But, because you don't realize in a couple of years where you're going to be going and how
Exactly.
you might be separated. And That's interesting. Yeah, I
I'm
don't think
still
we've had
friends.
don't think we had anybody said that specifically. So that's a great answer.
I have best friend who we met when we were 3 months old. I was 3 months old and she was born. We were across the street from each other, and our parents were best friends, and we're still best friends. And we've traveled together, and so it's one of those ones where those are the friendships that matter in the long run.
Right. Yeah, I'm lucky. I've got a couple of friends that I still, being from Gastonia, but my college roommate was somebody that I met in second or third grade, and but I still have some friends that I grew up with here locally that I still see and talk to on occasion. So
You've got to invest in those local friends and the long distance.
Yeah.
friends.
So again, I appreciate that answer greatly. Sal, this has been really good. So to make sure we hopefully will help your organization in some way, where can listeners go to learn more about the organization, get involved, donate? Any events you've got that might be coming up that you might want to share? Just how can listeners go about that? Of course, we'll also be sure to put this in the show notes so when people go to the podcast, they can see it also in writing. But what can you share with us about that?
Our website is really the central place, bitofhoperanch.org. And then there's a Get Involved tab. So if you want to volunteer, our biggest volunteer days and needs are Tuesdays, because that's our Special Need Riders Days. So if you want to volunteer, if you want to donate, if you want to find out about upcoming events, bitofhoperanch.org. That's the best place. And then there's lots of stuff on Facebook.
Okay, Facebook as well?
Yeah,
okay.
Meg does a lot of current posting on Facebook and what's happening at the ranch that weekend or that week, or did we rescue a new horse? What's all going on. We've actually, in the last year, rescued 3 horses.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think, dummy me, I knew that you did that, but I think the presentations I've seen, information I read, I'm always focused on the therapy side, not the horse rescue side. But so that's actually, that's exactly the point of having this podcast, is so dummies like me can hear more about things and other than just what I get so uber focused on or tunnel visioned on.
Now that you made a point of that, we probably need to say we're full, so we don't need 3 or 4 horses to arrive this afternoon.
Yeah, that's a good point, yes.
But we do rescue horses, and then we give them a good 3 or 4 month type trial to see if they're going to be able to work with children and families.
Right.
If they can't, then we rehome them. But yeah, so it's great to see what they can do for horses.
Well, this has been terrific, Sallie. I appreciate your time greatly. And I'm going to finish up this episode with my book recommendation and my quote or thought for the week. And, I've said this the last couple of episodes. I kind of try to pick something that might be related to the organization that we're talking about, but I'm not sure this really does. But there's a book I read, it was recommended to me years ago by a gentleman named Gary Chapman. It's called The 5 Love Languages. And if you haven't read that, if you're married in a relationship or anything like that, I would strongly recommend it. I have to admit, my wife, I want to say this on a podcast, but before reading that book, I thought what my wife was really interested in was not what she really was interested in. So I spent, the first 10 years of our relationship doing really dumb things. I
would recommend that book highly too. I read it when I had teenagers in my house, and each of my children are different.
Oh yeah,
and each of them have different love languages.
It's stunningly at our house that our 3 kids come from the same 2 adults and how different they are. It's shocking, frankly.
But it was nice to be able to focus on that child's love language and realize that I was actually doing something right.
Yes, but yeah, it really is an interesting book and one that actually can give you some practical, some practical actions and some practical things to do, and really, frankly, improved my ability to not be so dumb, frankly, which is a hard task. So my quote this week is kind of similar. It kind of talks about outlook and relationships, and Abraham Lincoln has a lot of great quotes, and if you really study him at all, and I have tried to do that, but one of my favorite quotes from Abraham Lincoln, and I think it can really apply to our times today and kind of what we're seeing maybe in the world, especially here in the States at the moment. But he said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." So to me, that's kind of a grace comment as well, is somebody who thinks differently maybe than us. It doesn't mean that they don't have good intentions, and maybe we should take some time to get to know them a little better, and we may at least take the attempt to understand somebody who might think differently than us. Again, I think that's a great quote, and something that he actually had to do a lot. If you study him at all, he had to work with a lot of individuals that didn't think the same way that he thought. So again, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please spread the word if you can about the podcast. And please don't hesitate to contact us here at podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We are always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, and please follow us on our social media platforms. You can also find us and subscribe and rate the podcast. That is, if it's going to be a 5-star rating, please, on most podcast services such as iTunes, Spotify, and Google. Thanks again to Sallie from Bit of Hope Ranch for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Amy Anderson and Elizabeth King from GSM Services and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.